Hello there. You are tuning into episode 7 of the Wild Bat podcast. We are still under the income tax and CCPC course. This is module 5, where we are discussing passive income and dividends. First, I want to address this here. This here is my new microphone, a MAONO. I will put a link in the description. Yeah, I've tested it out. It seems pretty good. It's just trying to get the setup right. All right, let's get into it. Dividends are taxed, not under Part 1, but under Part 4. Dividends being passive income, such as interest, rent, dividend, or capital gains, are not active business income. They are instead passive. You own an investment, and as a result, you get a return. The return for owning shares is dividends, and dividends are taxed under Part 4. You might want to go back to Module 3, because this module is going to discuss the grossing up and the dividend tax credit application, which also applies to how the corporation is taxed when it receives a dividend. So you may also want to look up the Income Tax Act, Section 112, how it talks about how it excludes dividends from Part 1. Okay, let's move on. One of the concepts when it comes to dividends is that what usually occurs is the dividends and multi-level corporate groups can be used in order to defer taxes or move money around into the best possible tax situation. The dividend rental arrangement was one of those examples. A DRA, or a dividend rental arrangement, is the scheme of where a shareholding in a corporation is moved from the person or another corporate entity to another entity, generally one that may not be taxable, or an entity that may have no regard to if it receives investment income. But it is done on the basis where it is only moved over on a temporary basis, and this is for the dividends to be distributed and then received by this other entity, and have this function where the dividends are not taxed, and then the person doesn't have to pay the taxes on the dividends. So under Section 248, it will define what a dividend rental arrangement is. And if it is defined as that, the dividend deduction under Part 1 will not be allowed. So this is how the Income Tax Act has determined the best way to create anti-avoidance of tax deferral or tax payment in result of dividends is to ensure that it is not pursued, because what we'll do is we'll deny the deduction under Part 1. And that's not what taxpayers want to hear. Right, we're going to shoot over to iVipo Scanner, where I'm going to talk about the collateralized preferred share scheme. All right, so before we begin, I've got my iVipo Scanner right here, And I've got my new mic right here, so I've got a few new toys to help me podcast a little better. Right, let's look at the collateralized preferred share scheme. So we're going to start off with a associated person or party. Say it's a person. The person has shares of controlling interest in X and Y. X here has a high earning, has plenty of money, and it has some property, that income earning property. Y doesn't have much, but it does have some non-capital losses. So is there a way for the non-capital losses to be used up by the property in X? Well, under this collateralized share scheme, this could be possible. The property is transferred to Y, and in return, the Y, in consideration, provides some preferred stock. So the idea is this. On year one, Y will have made some money from the income earning property, and rather than pay Part 1 tax, it will apply this against the non-capital losses that it has incurred from previous years. It will then provide a dividend to X. X will then have not received any taxable income in relation to this property. Instead, it will have only received a dividend from Y. So the question, is this allowed? The answer is no. Under subsection 112, 2.4, there will be a deduction, it will be a prohibition for the deduction of this dividend under Part 1 tax. So, if this is received on collateralized preferred shares, if it is defined as such. So again, it goes back to that concept where rather than the way they penalize this or prohibit this from occurring is by denying the deduction to Part 1 taxes. All right, so now let's look at another concept that is related to dividends and I guess transferring of shareholding, and that is the loss of shares on capital property. What can happen is a scheme can be elaborated in which one company purchases the share of an associated company, and the owner, the holding company, strips the surplus from its subsidiary company, and then as a result, it sells the subsidiary company shares at a discounted price because obviously it's taken all the surplus the surplus funds out of the company, and then would result in a possible capital loss, which can be applied against capital gains. The CRA and the Income Tax Act had thought about this, and this would be a disallowed capital loss if the conditions are met. As such, you own 5% or more of the entire shareholding of that subsidiary corporation, or if the shares are owned and that's the key thing, and the shares are owned less than 365 days. So as long as you own the shares longer than that time or have less than 5%, you should be in the clear. To wrap this up, we're going to talk about Part 4 tax and how it applies. Part 4 tax is a refundable tax. What happens is when the corporation receives dividends from another corporation, it pays Part 4 tax at a rate of 38.33% or 38 0.33%, noting that the 0.33 goes on for quite a while. So it pays this 38.33%, and then when the dividends are paid out, they recover Part 4 tax at 38.33%. From non-connected corporations, it's very simple. However, when the corporations are connected, perhaps there's a scheme of holding companies that are incurring, then it gets a little bit more complicated. One thing to note is that the multi-level corporate structures don't get taxed any more just because they're complicated. There is a flow of funds that do go from corporation to corporation up the corporation chain into the eventually to the real person who will pay the taxes as part of their personal taxes. But having these multiple levels, it's not illegal. It's definitely allowed, and it's not penalized under the tax code. There is free movement that is allowed of funds up and down the corporate structure, the corporate group structure. All that has to happen is the taxes, the dividends that are declared need to be put on Schedule 3 correctly, and as a result, refundable taxes are paid and then recovered, and there is no tax impact, generally speaking. However, if one of the corporations one of the subsidiary corporations have investment income from a portfolio or a non-connected corporation, then it gets a little bit complicated as the refundable taxes move up. I'll shoot back to IVPO Scanner where I'm going to show you an example. We are going to look at how refundable taxes can become a little bit complicated under connected corporations. So let's start off with number one, Doug. Doug right here has a holding company. The holding company owns 90% shares in an investment company that has a portfolio, which could be owned by, it could be supported by banks, any other multitude of arm's length investments. The other part of Investment Co is also owned by an arm's length party, a non-controlling interest. Alrighty. So let's just say that from the portfolio that Investment Co gets $10,000 of dividend income. On Investment Co's tax return, they're going to have paid Part 4 income of 38.33%. With some quick math, and I've got the calculator right here, but I don't need to calculate this. They will have paid $3,833 in Part 4 tax. Now, Investment Co, we're just going to make it a little bit complicated, wants to kick up a dividend to Holdco and the non-controlling interest in total of $20,000. So the Part 4 tax recovered is going to be 20,000 times 38.33%, 7,666, which means that they're going to get a dividend refund of of that, which is, just because of the double numbers. Alrighty, pretty simple so far. So what happens when we get up to this level? We're going to ignore the non-controlling interest at this point. We're just going to worry about Doug's own company, because we're not doing the non-controlling interest tax return. The holdco is going to get dividend income of 90% of the $20,000, which is going to be $18,000. Now, if you're a bit sloppy, you might be thinking, well, that's really, really simple. All we've got to do is holdco is going to have to pay Part 4 tax here of $18,000 times 0.38. That's really simple, like, oh, well, we've only got, that's all there is to it. But it isn't that, because the investment co is only paid $3,833 worth of Part 4 tax. So because of this misalignment that's occurred, what has to happen is, and they only own 90%, holdco is only entitled to 90% of the refundable taxes that have been paid. So the calculation is going to be the amount of dividends that holdco has received divided by the total dividends that were declared, 90%, we kind of knew that, 90% times the dividend taxes that were paid, which is another name for refundable taxes. Alrighty, so the dividend taxes that holdco have paid are $3,409.07, and depending on what dividend it wanted to kick up to Doug, just say it wanted to do the 18,000. I mean, it's going to be very simple. It's going to be what we had up here, which is going to result in a tax refund of hope that's right. It's going to result in a tax refund of about this. So it's a better scenario because less was paid, but yeah. Alrighty, that is all for now. Please join me for Module 6, which will be coming out next week. They'll be talking about passive income, refundable tax Part 1, and capital dividends. We're going to cover other types of investment income that a corporation will receive. Thank you and have a good night.